Ron DeSantis is at war with Disney. For over a year now, the Florida government has been locked in a conflict with Disney over its Special District, a region in Central Florida that was first given to the company back in 1967 to allow for the construction of the Magic Kingdom theme park. Currently, Disney is suing the Florida government over actions it describes as patently retaliatory, patently anti-business, and patently unconstitutional. But how did we get here? And how did one of the leading candidates in a party long known for being pro-business become so willing to take on the biggest company in his state? In March of 2022, Florida Republicans were in the process of passing the Parental Rights and Education Act, a bill which, among other things, banned public schools from teaching about sexual orientation or gender identity in a manner not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. Critics attacked the bill, labeling it "Don't Say Gay," and one of those critics just so happened to be Disney. After protests and walkouts within the company, Disney CEO Bob Chapek said that Disney had been opposed to the bill from the outset, and promised that the company would donate $5 million to LGBTQ advocacy organizations, pause all political donations within the state, and work to get the law repealed. State Republicans then hit back, with Ron DeSantis claiming that Disney's actions crossed a line.
This state is governed by the interests of the people of the state of Florida. It is not based on the demands of California corporate executives.
Later that month, DeSantis announced he would consider revoking Disney's special district entirely as a consequence for the company's actions, an unprecedented move by a Republican governor against his state's largest employer. But DeSantis' decision to go after Disney was received well by corners of the right that, at least historically, had always opposed government intervention into private business.
When corporations decide to become essentially tools of the Democratic Party, and when they do so, while having special tax districts, it is not out of bounds to take away their special privileges.
People who say, well, Disney just spoke up and expressed their opinion, they didn't just speak up and express their opinion. They actively tried to pursue killing a piece of legislation with lobbyists. And guess what? DeSantis responded.
These businesses should really learn this lesson now before it's too late. Stay in your lane. When Republicans, they get back into power, Apple and Disney need to understand one thing. Everything will be on the table. Your copyright and trademark protection, your special status within certain states, and even your corporate structure itself.
The idea that Republicans would go after corporations might sound crazy only a decade ago, when the Tea Party was still a driving force in right-wing politics, Republican leaders were celebrating the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United, and a primary line of attack against then-President Obama was that he was anti-business.
You didn't build that.
But as the employees of America's biggest companies drifted leftward in their politics, and those same companies began to view social activism as an effective business tactic, it set Republicans and corporations up for inevitable conflict. One of the first big clashes came in 2015 as Indiana legislators were attempting to pass a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that would codify protections for business owners who had religious objections to performing certain services. At the time, leaders of several large corporations threatened to move their business out of the state if Indiana went through with passing the law. Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, said he was concerned by the legislation and said the NCAA might reconsider hosting future events in Indiana. Tim Cook wrote in the Washington Post that, on behalf of Apple, he would stand up to oppose this new wave of legislation wherever it emerges. The home services company Angie's List announced it would be cancelling a $40 million proposed expansion in Indianapolis. In the end, that economic pressure made a difference, with Mike Pence, the governor of the state at the time, signing into law an amended bill with language almost identical to federal legislation that had already been in effect since the 1990s. And even that compromise didn't satisfy all of Indiana's corporate opponents, such as the CEO of Angie's List, who claimed the revisions were insufficient. After Indiana, corporations began weighing in much more frequently on political debates across the country, especially on social policy such as abortion, transgender bathroom access, toxic masculinity, and standing for the national anthem. That's the backdrop for DeSantis' feud with Disney, and it's why Florida Republicans think targeting the company for its political involvement might just be a political winner with a Republican base.
Almost every corporation in the United States now seems to feel a need at the behest of its employees or a small minority of its employees to get involved in politics.
That's Charles Cook, a conservative writer for National Review who's written a number of pieces about DeSantis' feud with Disney. One of his points is that while businesses have the right to take political positions, as with Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado, it's not always a good idea.
I think that's what's annoying conservatives about businesses at the moment. It's not that there are some businesses that say, look, we are a bit different, or we're founded by people from a particular religious sect, or, we have marginal views, which is all fine and welcome in the United States. It's that activists seem to be going after every single business and trying to turn them into political actors, and it's just not healthy.
Even in 2023, many Republicans who accept the premise that corporations are too involved in politics are hesitant about using state power to crack down on the activism. In Florida, it's also very clear that it's Disney, not corporations as a whole, being targeted by the state's government. Republicans there have claimed that Disney was never entitled to its special district, so passing legislation to strip it away is reasonable. But the state government is leaving in place over 1,800 other similar special districts, and in its lawsuit, Disney cites state legislators who in some cases have been very direct about their goals.
You can squint at this 150 different kinds of ways, and it's all going to come down to the same thing, which is Disney had a First Amendment right. DeSantis didn't like the way Disney exercised his First Amendment right, and he's executing a government reprisal. As a result, do not use the power of the state to punish a private corporation for exercising its First Amendment rights. That's not a squishy position, and it's one that, until 9 minutes ago, Republicans were all in on because they saw what governments tried to do to Chick-fil-A. They saw what governments tried to do to Hobby Lobby. And the rule cannot possibly be that the corporations I like enjoy First Amendment rights and the corporations I don't.
Going forward, it's not completely clear where the feud between Republicans and corporations ends up. Multiple Republican leaders, including Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, and even Donald Trump, have pushed back against Florida's feud with Disney, saying it goes too far or it's just a useless political stunt. From a bigger picture perspective, even in 2023, many conservatives find it difficult to imagine a future where Republicans don't support business.
I think that Republicans will inevitably be the party of business insofar as Republicans are by and large more interested in private enterprise than the Democrats are. Now, I think what has really changed on the right is that voters have started to say that in general, they have a negative conception of large corporations in a way that they would not have done 20 years ago. But the reason for that, by and large, is that those large corporations have been co-opted by progressives.